So a few years back, my grandmother lost her sense of hearing. In fact, she lost her sense of hearing completely. I mean, that's pretty bad. But fortunately, the good news is that her brain is really sharp. Her eyes are really sharp. So if you leave aside the hearing part, everything else is like really perfect for her. So whenever we have to communicate with her, whenever we want to have a conversation with her, we can't do it just by talking. We have to communicate with her through visuals, which means that we either use a sign language or we use a diary where we write words for her, words or sentences for her to read. The point being that we have to communicate with her through visuals. And surprisingly, or strangely enough, we have to do the same thing when we communicate with our audience. Yes, I mean, even if the medium that we use can be audio, video, or blog for that matter, but still we communicate with our audience through visuals. And let me just elaborate what I mean by that. Whenever I bombard an audience with a piece of information, if I'm just giving them information which doesn't have a visual representation, information which they can't visualize, which they can't really imagine in their mind or in their brain, then they're much more likely to forget that information, right? So as a content creator, I think I and you and all of us have to create visual stories. So when we tell a story to our audience, they have to visualize it. It's like you are playing a movie inside their head, because the more the visual the stories, the lesser the audience is likely to forget them. Or in other words, the audience will remember if you tell them visual stories. So what do I mean by visual stories? And in fact, how do you create these visual stories is what I want to get into. So here are three very easy single tips to create these visual stories. The first one is very simple. Give a physical location to your story. So what do I mean by that? Well, don't just start a story with uh, with the information, or don't just get started with the story without describing the physical location of where this story is taking place. So I'll give you an example so you can visualize this, right? Example number one is, I was reading Harry Potter. That's it. That's the start of the story. I was reading Harry Potter. But where was I sitting? Was I sitting on this chair? Was I outside? Was I in the train? Was I in the coffee shop? You don't really know that. And because without these details, you will find it very hard to visualize what do I mean, or it'll be hard for you to visualize where I was sitting. And again, the story becomes hard for you to remember. So instead of saying I was reading Harry Potter, I could just say I was sitting on a bench in the park as the sun was setting. I was reading Harry Potter, right? So now I've painted a scene. I was sitting on a bench. Okay, so you visualize a bench, you visualize me reading Harry Potter. You also see that the sun is setting. Now, this is a much better picture for you to remember, right? So always start with a physical location to your story, or at least as much as possible. I'm not saying it's possible all the time, but this is a very good trick to get inside, to get the image inside your audience's head. So you can answer questions like where you are sitting, what time of the day is it, are there people around you, are you alone, is it quiet, is it noisy? You can describe all of these things as you get started in the story. That's point number one. Point number two is never be vague, because vagueness is the opposite or the enemy of memory. We forget vagueness, but we remember specificity. The more vague you tell your story, the easier it is for your audience to forget it. So again, let me give an example. Which of these two sentences sound better? Example one is, my friend was sitting in a cafe and drinking coffee. Very simple sentence, right? My friend was sitting in a cafe and drinking coffee. That's example one, or that's sentence one. Sentence two is, my friend John was at Starbucks, or rather, my friend John sat at Starbucks while sipping on a hot Americano. My friend John sat at Starbucks while sipping on a hot Americano. So what changed? In the first sentence, I just said my friend was sitting in a cafe and drinking coffee. So I mean, of course, I've given a physical location to this, and you know that, okay, this person is my friend, but I've not described this friend. Is he young or is he old? Is he male or female? Right. So I've not given those details, and I've just said coffee, and coffee could mean anything. There are so many types of coffees. But in the second sentence, I said my friend John. Okay, so you see a certain John at Starbucks. So he's not sitting at a local coffee shop. He's not sitting in a small coffee shop. He's sitting at Starbucks. Okay, so the picture has gotten much clearer now. And he's sitting on a hot Americano. So he's not sipping on a cappuccino. He's not sipping on a frappuccino. He's not sipping on some other drink, but he's sipping on a hot Americano. So this is specific. The first statement is vague. Again, hard for you to visualize. The second statement is specific, easy for you to visualize, and just easy for you to remember as well. So with a bit of specificity, the story becomes much easier to visualize. And the last point to make your stories visual is show, don't tell. And I know we keep on hearing this, that okay, show, don't tell, and there are many examples to show that. I think it works beautifully in a relationship, right? I mean, you instead of saying to your wife or your husband that you care about them, you might as well show that you care about them, or you do gestures which tell them that okay, this person actually cares about me. So there are multiple ways to do this, which I'll get into in a minute. But just know that your audience basically wants to find answers on their own. They don't want to be given these answers. They don't want to be told these answers. They want to be able to put two and two together. They want to do the work of putting them together. They don't want to be spoon fed. Is one of the underlying learnings of mine as a storyteller. So for example, let me give two examples of this. So one is, I can say, I saw Julia and I found and I felt myself getting angry. I saw Julia and I felt myself getting angry. Is this statement clear? Yes, it's pretty clear. But again, I'm giving the answer. I'm like, telling the audience right away. I'm sort of spoon feeding them. Instead, if I say, as I saw Julia, I felt my cheeks go red. As I saw Julia, I felt my cheeks go red. So I'm not giving you the answers directly. I am sort of building up a scenario here. I'm sort of building up a scene so that you can see, okay, this guy's cheeks are going red, which means that he's probably angry with Julia. Okay, another example is this. John had a crush on Anita. Again, I'm giving you the answer. John had a crush on Anita. Or I could say, whenever Anita was around, John couldn't help but smile. Whenever Anita was around, John couldn't help but smile. So when I say this, now it's pretty clear that okay, John is very fond of Anita, and that's why he likes her company. And okay, it also could mean that he has a crush on her. So I'm not directly telling you that okay, John has a crush on Anita, but I'm building up a story, or I'm building up a situation where that is the implication, right? So all of these things, right? I mean, we started with giving a physical location to your story. We started with being specific and not vague, and we started then we ended with showing and not telling. All of these create visual stories which your audience can remember. Your audience doesn't have to forget your stories. They can remember those stories, and these are the three ways of doing it. Now, of course, this might be a little overwhelming because you might feel, okay, this is a lot. I don't know how to incorporate all of these three principles in my writing or in my story, which is fine, which is fair. I mean, this fear is fair, right? So what I would say is pick one. Don't pick three. Pick one for now. Practice with it, play with it a little bit, and then go to the second one. Don't try all of them at once. Or as my grandmother likes to say, don't take such a big bite. Take only what you can chew. Thank you.